They told you it was a place of healing, a sanctuary on a silent island where the wealthy and the wounded could go to unburden their minds, to have their most painful memories gently washed away by a revolutionary new therapy. They called it the Stillwater Sanitarium, a place to find peace, but the memories were not forgotten. They were harvested, bottled like rare wine, and sold to a clientele of jaded aristocrats who had grown so bored with their own perfect lives, they would pay a fortune to feel someone else's authentic pain. Before we board the ferry to that silent shore, understand where you are going. This channel does not tell bedtime stories. We perform autopsies on the beautiful lies that comfort the powerful. If you are afraid of what you might find inside, turn back now. But if you have the courage to see the true marketplace of the human soul, then subscribe. Show us you are ready to witness the transaction. This was not a failure of medicine. It was the birth of a new and horrifying commerce, the trade in raw, distilled human experience, a place where grief was a commodity, trauma was a treasure, and the price of one man's peace was another man's fleeting, intoxicating taste of real life. Our story begins in the Gilded Age, at the dawn of the 20th century, an era of impossible wealth and deeply buried secrets. Off the coast of New England, shrouded in a perpetual silvery mist, lay a small, private island accessible only by a single ferry. This was the home of the Stillwater Sanitarium. It was the most exclusive and discreet mental health retreat in the world, a haven for industrialists who had ruined a rival, for society wives trapped in loveless marriages, for sons who had inherited a legacy of violence. They all came seeking the same thing, the blissful peace of forgetting, and a man named Dr. Alistair Blackwood promised to give it to them for a price. He was not a healer, he was a merchant, and his product was you. Dr. Alistair Blackwood was a man who moved through the world like a ghost. He was handsome in a severe, sculpted way, with eyes the color of a calm sea before a storm. His voice was a soft, hypnotic baritone, a precision instrument of empathy and reassurance. He had been a brilliant but controversial figure in the burgeoning field of psychoanalysis, quietly dismissed from his university post for his radical theories on memory. He did not believe memory was an ephemeral thought. He believed it was a tangible biochemical substance, a neurostain that could, with the right techniques, be isolated, extracted, and even transferred. The Stillwater Sanitarium was the physical manifestation of his theory. It was not a hospital, it was a distillery. The architecture was serene and calming, a masterpiece of arts and crafts design, all warm wood and gentle, flowing lines, designed to lull the conscious mind into a state of absolute trust. The real work was done in the hydrotherapy wing. This was a series of quiet, private chambers, each containing a single, deep, copper-lined immersion tank filled with a saline solution, infused with a complex mixture of alkaloids and rare earth minerals. The process was elegant and deeply insidious. A patient would be submerged in the warm, mineral-rich water. Blackwood would then guide them through a deep, hypnotic regression, leading them back to the traumatic memory they wished to erase. As the patient relived the event, their brain would release a cascade of specific neurochemicals. The proprietary mineral solution in the water acted as a catalyst, a psychic solvent, bonding with these chemicals, drawing the memory out of the patient's mind and into the water itself. After a series of sessions, the memory would be gone, leaving behind only a faint, scar-like sense that something was missing. The patient would feel a profound, hollow peace. The water, now infused with the raw, distilled essence of their trauma, was then carefully drained and bottled. The patrons of this dark trade were the other side of Blackwood's clientele. They were the jaded, the bored, the fabulously wealthy who had exhausted every pleasure the world could offer. They were men and women so insulated by their privilege that they had lost the ability to feel anything real. They came to Stillwater not to forget, but to feel. This was the sensory immersion therapy. A client would select a memory from Blackwood's carefully curated catalogue: a soldier's terror on the battlefield, a mother's grief at the loss of a child, a lover's searing betrayal. The bottled memory essence would then be decanted into a fresh immersion tank. The client would be submerged, and as the chemicals were absorbed through their skin, they would experience the memory not as a story, but as a full sensory reality. They would feel the soldier's terror, the mother's grief, the lover's pain. For a few fleeting hours, they could rent a piece of a real human soul. It was the ultimate, decadent, and empiric tourism. The first to suspect the true nature of this transaction was a young nurse named Clara. She was a recent hire, a compassionate woman who truly believed in Dr. Blackwood's mission of healing. But she began to notice a disturbing pattern. The patients who left, supposedly cured, seemed diminished. Lighter, yes, but also less substantial, as if a vital part of them had been carved away. Conversely, she watched the sensory immersion clients. She saw a famously stoic industrialist emerge from a session weeping with an emotion he had never shown in his life. She saw a cold, calculating society DN leave the hydrotherapy wing flushed and trembling, as if she had just experienced a passionate, illicit affair. They came in empty and left overflowing with second-hand emotion. Her suspicions solidified when she was cleaning one of the immersion chambers after a memory extraction session. A patient, a man haunted by a violent crime he had committed, had just been treated. As Clara drained the tank, she noticed a strange, oily residue on the surface of the water, a shimmering, faintly luminous film. On an impulse she couldn't explain, she dipped her finger in it. A jolt went through her, a psychic flash of pure, undiluted information. For a split second, she was not in the sanitarium. She was in a dark, rain-slicked alleyway. She felt the weight of a heavy object in her hand. She felt a surge of white-hot rage, followed by a wave of sickening, self-loathing regret. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her gasping, her heart pounding. She had not touched water. She had touched the raw, unprocessed memory of a violent act. She stumbled back, the ghost of another man's sin clinging to her skin. The sanitarium was not a place of healing. It was a place of exchange. Clara's accidental contact with the memory essence left her terrified and fundamentally changed. She began to see the sanitarium not as a hospital, but as a marketplace. The gentle, therapeutic language Blackwood used was the polished sales patter of a merchant dealing in the rarest of commodities. She started to pay closer attention, to listen, to watch. She became an unwilling archivist of the secret economy of pain. She observed the curation process. After each extraction, a small sample of the memory-infused water was taken to Blackwood's private laboratory. There, he would perform a sensory analysis. He would immerse himself just for a moment to taste the vintage, to assess its purity, its intensity, its flavor profile. He would then catalog it with the chilling precision of a master sommelier. Betrayal, spurned lover, 1903. Notes of searing jealousy with an undertone of profound, self-pitying despair. High intensity, excellent clarity. Or combat trauma veteran, 1898. A chaotic bouquet of terror, adrenaline, and survivor's guilt. Primal but lacks nuance. Best for inexperienced palates. The clients were connoisseurs of suffering. Clara watched as they perused Blackwood's catalog, their jaded faces showing a flicker of interest as they debated their next experience. "I tried a childhood abandonment last month," one aging stockbroker remarked to another in the lounge. "It was quite poignant, but I'm looking for something with a bit more texture." Blackwood recommends a financial ruin. He says the despair has a wonderfully clean finish. Clara knew she had to find proof, something more tangible than her own horrifying experience. Her opportunity came in the form of a new patient, a young writer named Julian Croft. He was not like the others. He had not come to erase a single traumatic event. He was suffering from a profound creative block, a feeling of emotional emptiness he couldn't explain. He had come to Stillwater hoping to reawaken his sensitivities. He was, unknowingly, a man with a healthy soul seeking a cure in a place that specialized in removing them. Clara saw in Julian a potential ally. He was observant, intelligent, and his senses had not been dulled by a lifetime of privilege. She began to speak with him, not as a nurse to a patient, but as a conspirator. She didn't tell him the whole truth. She planted seeds of doubt. "Have you noticed, Mr. Croft," she would say, "how the patients who leave seem quieter, and how the guests who come for the sensory treatment seem so full of stories?" Julian, the writer, began to notice. He saw the hollowed-out look in the eyes of the cured and the feverish, almost manic energy of the sensory clients. He started his own quiet investigation, using his writer's eye for detail to document the subtle transactions of the island. He pretended to be undergoing the memory extraction therapy, but instead of focusing on a painful memory, he used the hypnotic sessions to observe Blackwood's technique, to analyze the chemical composition of the water through its taste and smell. His journal became the counterledger to Blackwood's catalog. May 12, 905. The process is a form of psychic osmosis. The mineral solution acts as a medium, and the hypnotic state lowers the barrier of the mind. Blackwood is a master hypnotist, but his questions are not designed to heal. They are designed to isolate and extract. He is a miner, and he is searching for the purest veins of emotional ore. I felt my own memories being probed, tested for their intensity. He was disappointed. My angst, as he called it, was too cerebral. not pure enough for a quality extraction. Proof Julian and Clara needed came from Blackwood's most prized possession, his private cellar. Hidden in a cold stone basement beneath the hydrotherapy wing was a vault. Inside, arranged on mahogany racks like priceless vintages, were hundreds of elegantly stoppered crystal bottles, each containing a single distilled human memory. Each bottle was marked with a simple, handwritten label: Grief, 1899, Rage, 1902, Ecstasy, 1904. This was his inventory. The crown jewels of his collection were in a separate, temperature-controlled cabinet. These were the purest experiences, the most intense traumas, saved for his most discerning and highest-paying clients. One bottle, glowing with a faint, angry red light, was labeled simply, Vengeance Fulfilled. The discovery of the cellar was a revelation. It was the physical, undeniable proof of Blackwood's monstrous trade. Julian, his writer's soul ignited with a purpose he hadn't felt in years, knew they couldn't just expose Blackwood. That would lead to a quiet cover-up, the sanitarium closed, the secrets buried. He had to do something more. He had to destroy the market itself. He had to make the product toxic. His plan was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, a story only a writer could conceive. He and Clara identified Blackwood's most important client, Lord Harrington, a man so jaded, so utterly bored with his own existence, that he was Blackwood's most adventurous and highest-paying connoisseur. Harrington was scheduled to arrive in 3 days for a private tasting of a new, exceptionally rare acquisition, the first-hand experience of a condemned man's final moments before execution. Julian's plan was to contaminate the vintage. He began by writing. For 2 days, he locked himself in his room, crafting a story, a fictional memory. It was the story of a man on death row, yes, but it was interwoven with a strange, insidious, and terrifying philosophical concept, the chilling, absolute certainty that his reality, and the reality of anyone experiencing his memory, was a fabrication, a dream in the mind of a sleeping, malevolent god. It was a memory infused with a solipsism virus, a perfect, logical, and inescapable intellectual trap. Clara's role was to be the delivery system. The night before Harrington's arrival, she slipped into Blackwood's laboratory. She found the bottled memory of the condemned man, a liquid that pulsed with a faint, gray light. Using a hypodermic needle, she carefully injected a small amount of a specially prepared chemical compound into the bottle, a mild psychoactive agent Julian had identified from his own treatments, just enough to act as a carrier for the information he had created. He believed, as Blackwood did, that memory was a substance. He was about to prove that it could be written. The next evening, Lord Harrington arrived. Blackwood, with the pride of a vintner unveiling his masterpiece, presented the rare vintage. Harrington, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, was submerged in the immersion tank. The contaminated memory essence was decanted into the water. At first, everything went as planned. Harrington experienced the cold dread of the prison cell, the final walk, the priest's empty words. But then Julian's virus began to take root. The condemned man's final thoughts were not of fear or regret, but of a sudden, terrifying lucidity. The realization that the guards, the priest, the executioner, none of it was real, that he was a character in a meaningless play. And then the final twist, the chilling thought that anyone experiencing this memory must, therefore, also be a character in the same play. The feedback loop was instantaneous and absolute. Lord Harrington, floating in the tank, was not just experiencing a memory. He was experiencing the complete and total collapse of his own reality. He began to scream, a raw, terrified sound of a man whose very foundations had been pulled out from under him. He thrashed in the tank, clawing at his own face, trying to wake up from a nightmare he now believed was his entire existence. Blackwood and his assistants, horrified, pulled Harrington from the tank, but the damage was done. The virus had been uploaded. Harrington was still screaming, his eyes wide with a new, permanent, and unshakable madness. "It's not real," he shrieked, pointing at Blackwood, at the walls, at his own hands. "None of it is real. We're all just a dream in its head." This is the tourney. In G-Point, the moment the exploited turns the master's own weapon against him, when the product becomes a poison. If you understand this profound act of rebellion, this beautiful, terrible act of information warfare, then make your presence known. This story is for those who know that the most powerful cages are the ones we build in our own minds, and that the right idea can be the key. Hit the like button. Subscribe. The market is about to crash. The psychic detonation of Lord Harrington was a catastrophe from which the Stillwater Sanitarium could not recover. Harrington, one of the most powerful men in the country, was now irretrievably insane, trapped in a permanent state of solipsistic terror. His family, powerful and vengeful, descended upon the island. They did not care about Blackwood's methods. They cared that he had broken their most valuable asset. The other sensory clients, hearing of Harrington's fate, fled the island in a panic. The risk was no longer a thrilling diversion. It was a terrifying existential threat. The market for stolen memories evaporated overnight. No one would dare taste a vintage now, for fear it might be contaminated with the same reality-destroying virus. Dr. Blackwood's perfect contained system was shattered. He was faced with ruin, both financially and professionally. In a desperate attempt to understand what had gone wrong, he did the one thing he had always avoided. He immersed himself in the contaminated tank to experience the vintage that had broken Harrington. He was a man of immense psychic discipline, but he was not prepared for the elegant, terrifying logic of Julian's creation. He experienced the memory, the execution, and then the viral thought. As a man who had spent his life manipulating the minds of others, the idea that his own mind was not his own was the ultimate personal horror. He was caught in the same feedback loop as Harrington, but his analytical mind fought it, trying to find a flaw and escape. The struggle was too much. It shattered his consciousness into 1,000 pieces. Clara and Julian found him later, sitting by the empty immersion tank, humming softly to himself, his brilliant, sea-colored eyes now as vacant as those of the patients he had cured. The master of memories no longer had one of his own. Clara and Julian's role in the affair was never discovered. They were simply a nurse and a patient who were evacuated along with everyone else when the sanitarium was shut down by Harrington's furious family. They slipped away, two quiet conspirators who had toppled an empire of the soul. The sanitarium was closed, its secrets buried to avoid a greater scandal. The remaining patients were transferred to conventional asylums, their strange, hollowed-out condition baffling doctors for decades. The cellar of bottled memories was seized by the Harrington family's private agents. It was not destroyed. The collection of raw human experience was too valuable, too potent a resource. It was locked away in a private vault, becoming a secret family legacy, a library of souls waiting for a new, more careful reader. Julian Croft returned to the world, his writer's block gone. He was filled with a universe of stories, the ghost memories of the people he had encountered on the island. He spent the rest of his life writing, not fiction, but thinly disguised accounts of what he had seen, stories of psychic vampirism and the commerce of the soul, tales that were dismissed by critics as brilliant but fantastical Gothic horror. He was hiding the truth in plain sight. Clara the nurse vanished from the historical record. She had seen too much, had come too close to the raw, unprocessed horrors of the human mind. Some say she entered a convent, seeking a different kind of peace. Others say she dedicated her life to caring for the broken graduates of Stillwater, the only person who understood the nature of their strange, quiet emptiness. She was the silent keeper of the story, the one who knew that the peace they had been sold was just the shadow of a stolen life. The Stillwater Sanitarium was erased, its beautiful buildings left to be reclaimed by the island's mist and silence. But the science, the core principle of Blackwood's work, did not die. The knowledge that memory could be treated as a substance, extracted, stored, and transferred, was too revolutionary to be forgotten. The Harrington family, now in possession of the world's most unique and dangerous library, did not let it sit idle. They funded a new generation of researchers, men more cautious and more ambitious than Blackwood. They learned from his mistakes. They understood that selling raw, unprocessed trauma was too volatile, too risky. The new science was not about selling experiences. It was about creating them. They began to deconstruct the bottled memories, to analyze their chemical and psychic components. They learned to isolate the essence of courage from a soldier's terror, to distill tea. His feeling of love from a widow's grief, to extract a pure, marketable thrill from a memory of a violent crime. They were no longer selling memories. They were selling emotions. This new, refined product was introduced into the world with subtle, brilliant precision. A drop of distilled confidence in a bottle of cologne for men, a hint of serene acceptance in a lady's perfume, a trace of manufactured nostalgia in the scent of a new brand of cigarettes. The commerce of the soul went from a boutique, bespoke trade to a mass-market commodity. People all over the world began to buy small, fleeting feelings, never knowing they were consuming the recycled, purified ghosts of other people's lives. Final terrible irony is Julian's legacy. His solipsism virus, the brilliant act of sabotage meant to destroy the system, became its most valuable asset. The Harrington researchers learned to harness its power. They created diluted, controlled versions of it, they created media films, stories, advertisements that were not just entertaining, but were designed to subtly blur the line between reality and fiction, to implant the quiet, background hum of doubt about one's own perceptions. A population that is not quite sure what is real is a population that is profoundly easy to sell to. Julian had tried to awaken the world, and in doing so, had handed them the ultimate tool for lulling it to sleep. The story of Stillwater is a warning that when you find a way to monetize the human soul, the market will always find a way to expand. Blackwood Sanitarium, with its immersion tanks and bottled traumas, was simply the brutal, clumsy, artisanal beginning. The factory is now global, and the product is in the air you breathe. The Stillwater Sanitarium is not a place. It is a business model, a model built on the terrifyingly simple truth that the most valuable resource on Earth is not gold or oil, but the raw, unfiltered experience of a human life. Blackwood's genius was to prove that this resource could be extracted, refined, and sold. His mistake was in selling the raw product. The modern world learned that it is far more profitable and far less dangerous to sell the refined derivatives. You are not buying a bottle of grief. You are scrolling through a feed of curated outrage, a carefully engineered emotional product designed to keep you engaged. You are not immersing yourself in a memory of love. You are watching a romantic comedy whose structure and musical cues have been perfectly calibrated to trigger a predictable, marketable, and ultimately hollow emotional response. The commerce of the soul is the background hum of your entire civilization. It is the business of creating artificial desires and selling you the artificial feelings that come with satisfying them. The ultimate goal is not to make you happy. It is to make you a more efficient consumer of emotion. Julian's rebellion is the cautionary tale. He fought the system with an idea, a meme, a virus of thought, and the system did not break. It learned. It absorbed his weapon, diluted it, and sold it back to the masses as entertainment. It learned that a little bit of existential dread, a little bit of confusion about what is real, makes for a wonderfully compliant and suggestible audience. So what is the rebellion now? It is not to create a more powerful virus. It is to refuse to be a consumer. It is the conscious, difficult, and deliberate act of seeking out and creating authentic, unprocessed, and unmarketable experiences. It is the choice to feel your own messy, inconvenient, and unprofitable emotions, to find your value not in what you can consume, but in the raw, undistilled reality of your own singular life. It is time to make a choice. Will you be a customer in their marketplace of feelings, or will you be the proprietor of your own soul? In the comments below, it is time to close your account. Make your declaration. State it twice to make it final. I am not for sale. I am not for sale. This is your refusal to participate in the transaction. If you are ready to continue this work, to identify the modern merchants and their invisible products, subscribe. Activate the notification bell, for the advertisements for your own soul are constant and everywhere. Share this with one other person who you know is tired of feeling secondhand emotions. They have created a world where you can buy any feelings you want. We are here to remind you of the profound, rebellious power of the one thing you can only ever truly own, your own pain.